And so moving on to the next session, it's going to be all about the MCAT, which, like we've heard throughout the day, is such an important piece of this whole application. And it really makes a difference when you're applying. We have two incredible MCAT experts, Dr. Ken Tao and Hunter Enright, who are on. And for the next hour, they're going to be telling you all about the MCAT. So good to see you both, and you can take it from here. I'll see you all in an hour.
Great. Thanks, Dan, for the introduction. And hey, everyone, it's great to be here and to speak with all of you about the MCAT exam. So the topic of our presentation today is how to get a 99th percentile MCAT score, which I'm sure all of you would love to have for your medical school application. To get started, Hunter and I are going to briefly introduce ourselves. So my name is Ken. I'm the director of MCAT for Med School Coach, and I completed my undergraduate studies at UC Berkeley. I then worked as a research specialist for a year before starting my PhD in neuroscience at Harvard University, which I completed a couple of years ago. My research thesis was specifically on the neurobiology of digestion, so how your brain controls your digestive system. In terms of my MCAT expertise, I have been in the MCAT space for almost 12 years now. For the first 5 years, I was with the Princeton Review as a senior MCAT instructor, premier tutor, and instructor trainer. So that means I used to fly all across the country, training new individuals to become MCAT instructors for the Princeton Review. Then about 7 years ago, I was recruited by Med School Coach to start our MCAT program. And now we have what I would consider the top MCAT tutoring company in the country. And joining me today, it's Hunter, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I would. Thanks, Ken. Hey, everybody. How's it going? My name is Hunter Enright. I've been around the block. I've been an MCAT tutor for close to a decade now. I actually think I'm pushing year 11, so like that makes me feel good. The first 5 years I was with Kaplan. The next five I was with Blueprint, and like I did a bunch of things while tutoring for both those companies. I developed content, built programs, did a lot of marketing. I'm so sorry if any of y'all are still getting like ads with me in them pushed to you on YouTube. Like I have no control over that anymore, so I'm so sorry. Sorry, Lena. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. um, but yeah, so it's been a really good time. I just recently joined Med School Coach back in January to essentially just kind of join the team and level everything up, make our tutoring program that's already one of the best in the world even better, develop resources for them, et cetera, et cetera. And to just make it, a good time. So heck yeah. Thomas, yeah, I'm so sorry. I get that a lot. Yeah, the commercials, I still have short hair, so they're kind of dated, but yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I was a non-trad student myself, so I prepped for the MCAT when I was about 24 or so, working full-time Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So if there's any of us that are actually throw a thumbs up in the chat if y'all are non-trads outside of undergrad, because it's possible. I promise it is absolutely possible. It's a little extra work, but yeah, it's a good time. Non-trads represent. There's dozens of us. Yes.
All right. So I know when you're thinking about years of experience, you've heard 12 years, 11 years. I know that might not sound like a lot. You've probably heard of people in their field of expertise for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, but I do want to emphasize that the MCAT went through a very substantial revision in 2015, right? So the current version of the exam has only been around for 10 years. So Hunter and I have really been through the entire period of the current variation of the MCAT exam. And of course, we're very happy to be here and want to hopefully share a lot of helpful knowledge to all of you. And as part of this, it'd actually be very helpful for us to know a little bit about each of you. So right now, if you can just go ahead and write in the chat for us, let us know what year in school you are. So if you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, high school, if you've graduated college, right? We know there's a lot of non-traditional students in here. It's always helpful for us to get a sense of who we're speaking to. And you can probably tell there's a ton of people in this presentation today because the chat is literally flying, right? But I will say, I see lots of college students, right? Freshmen, sophomore, juniors, seniors. I also see a lot of high school students. So great for all of you who are starting early, learning about this path towards becoming a physician. Now, I have one other question, and for this one, I expect fewer responses. The chat's probably still going to be moving quickly, but that second question is, when are you planning on taking the MCAT exam, right? So the soonest I expect is maybe some of you who are taking the MCAT this month of April, maybe May, this summer, 2026, 2027, and on. And I thought we'd be getting fewer responses, but the chat is probably moving just as fast as before. So we have people taking the MCAT in all years and plenty of you taking it this year as well. So fantastic. This presentation is going to be helpful for all of you. So now let's talk a little bit about the plan for today. So we said the webinar is how to get a 99th percentile MCAT score. I want to start first by defining what exactly is a 99th percentile MCAT score. From there, we're going to talk about how to get that score, and we're also going to talk about how Med School Coach can possibly help you along the way. And finally, at the end, it's going to be open Q&A. You've had a number of presentations today, so you know how this is going to work. You're going to submit your questions, and Hunter and I will answer them. All right. So what is a 99th percentile MCAT score? So to start first, in terms of statistics, right, a percentile is essentially how you compare with others. So for example, if you get a 70th percentile score, that means you have a score that is higher than 70% of all test takers. So of course, that means if you have a 99th percentile MCAT score, you have a score higher than 99% of all test takers. In other words, you are in the top 1% of all MCAT test takers. And you can see on the slide, as noted by one of you in the chat, right, the MCAT score distribution does follow the normal curve, a normal distribution, the bell curve, right? What this essentially means is that most students who take the MCAT get a score somewhere around the middle, around the average, close to 500. That means very few students get a low score, very few students get a high score. And again, if we want a 99th percentile MCAT score, it's actually not a perfect score of 528, because if you look at this chart, actually there's probably 0.1% of students or less that get a 528, right? So a 528 is actually probably a 99.9th percentile MCAT score, but today we're looking at a 99th percentile MCAT score, which is actually any score from 522 to 528. So as long as you're scoring within this range, you have what we consider a 99th percentile MCAT score. Now, of course, a great question is, do you need a 99th percentile MCAT score? And I'm sure you've gathered from presentations before that you certainly don't need a 99th percentile MCAT score. And this chart here, I actually find quite helpful for students to think about what kind of score they need. So if you look at this table, you can see for rows, we have GPA, and for columns, we have your MCAT score. What this table shows is stats directly from the AAMC for what percentage of students with different MCAT and GPA combinations were accepted to medical school. So let's say, for example, you've got a 3.5 GPA and you scored a 511 on the MCAT. If we look at this table, we can see, all right, 3.5 GPA, that's between 3.4 to 3.59, and a 511 MCAT score, that's between 510 to 513. This shows that 47.5% of applicants with those MCAT and GPA combinations were accepted to medical school. And of course, if you look at this table, it helps to realize pretty quickly that you do want higher numbers, right? The higher your MCAT, the higher GPA, the higher your chances of getting accepted. And of course, you can see with the highest numbers, right? We've got a GPA greater than 3.79, an MCAT score greater than 517, that 84.2% of those students were accepted to medical school, which of course is pretty darn good, right? You also note that's not 100%, and that's simply because getting into medical school is more than just your MCAT and GPA. It is everything else that you have heard of today, your extracurriculars, your personal statements, your letters of recommendations. There really is quite a lot that goes into your medical school application. All right, now, since we understand how this table works, I do want to address a couple of questions that we often get, which is, let's say you're a student who did really well in your college courses. You've got a 4.0 GPA or close to that. You might ask, since I have a really good GPA, can I get away with a lower MCAT score, right? Well, we said earlier, average MCAT is around 500. So if you're below average, you're maybe 494, 497. You can see even if you've got a GPA greater than 3.79, you're looking at only 17.1% of students who get accepted to medical school. So my response to that really is, if you have a high GPA and you didn't do so well in the MCAT, you should really plan on retaking the MCAT, because you can see how improving your score by a few points with that amazing GPA really increases your chances of getting accepted. Now, let's consider the opposite. Let's say your GPA is not as good as you wanted, right? And we hear this from students all the time, right? Which, maybe it was a little tough early on. You didn't do so well in your freshman courses, and maybe it took you a couple years to adjust to college. And by your junior and senior year, you've started to raise your GPA, but because of your grades from your earlier years of college, your GPA is just not where you want it to be, right? So let's say you've got a GPA of 3.1, right? So 3.1 GPA, that's definitely on the lower side for a pre-med, right? If you've got a 3.1 GPA, and let's say you crush the MCAT, you get a score greater than 517, you're looking at 52.6% of those students were accepted to medical school. And that's honestly pretty darn good, right? So my main point here is, for a lot of students who didn't do so well in their college classes and aren't feeling great about their chances of getting accepted to medical school, you don't have to say, oh, I got to give up my dreams of becoming a physician. If you crush the MCAT, you can really compensate for that lower GPA. All right. So with that information, just a few key points here, right? MCAT, GPA, both very important, right? The higher you scored, the higher your chances of getting into medical school. And if you've got a lower GPA, you can always make up for that with a higher MCAT score. All right. So now that we've given you some background information on a 99th percentile MCAT score, I'm going to hand it over to Hunter, who's going to talk a little bit more about how to get that score.
Heck yeah. And before we dive into what's on the screen, I saw a couple of interesting questions in the chat that I just want to address real fast. So somebody asked, with the bell curve of the scores, is that natural, or is that just a consequence of the question difficulty? No, that is totally the AMC. So they don't scale their test results; they equate them, and it's very different according to them. But basically, they have their own little secret recipe of stuff that they do after everyone submits the test. And they kind of compile and figure out, okay, like, what is the average score? And it doesn't matter if you got like 90% of the questions correct, right? Like, if your 90% is literally the average score of everyone, you're going to get a 500 because or 501, because that's like the average score, right? And then like, that's one of the harder things too, to explain to a lot of either students who are new to the MCAT and haven't really looked into it, or honestly like parents and trying to explain how scores work to them. It's, what the heck? Like, I got more questions correct on this test than I did the last one. How come my score didn't increase? Or honestly, I've seen it where sometimes the raw score is the number of questions you get correct, that goes up, but their actual like 500 score goes down. And it's because it's all percentile based. Like, if you do a little bit better than you did on the last one, but everyone else does a lot of bit better, then you're now behind the curve, if that makes sense. So it's this weird thing to wrap your head around, but like, percentiles are a big thing, and that's why they kind of jokingly but not jokingly say that pre-med is so competitive and the MCAT is competitive, because it's kind of like you against everyone that's taking the test on that day. But I don't like that. I personally think that it's it's all of us, the collective we, pre-meds versus the AMC and versus the MCAT. So that's how I like to go into it. So I had a couple of good questions, just like how score was working. Just want to touch on it for a second, but let's talk about how to get those scores so we're not on the back end of the curve and we're kind of more on the front half and in those good scores, right? So long story short, you need an effective study plan, okay? And like it's cliche at this point, but like cliches get that way because they're usually right. It works smarter, not harder. So I have had students over the years who just like grind and like bash their head against the wall and do rote memorization, all this stuff, and like their score doesn't really change. So one of the best things you can do is figure out a plan. And actually, I saw a couple of people in the chat too saying, hey, I'm retesting, in a couple months. What should I do? And the answer is like, if it didn't work last time, you need to do something differently. So again, having a plan, figuring out what were you doing before, what am I going to do for the next X number of, weeks, months of my life is so important. So usually, MCAT prep plans are usually between 3 to 6 months. I've had a couple 9+ers, 9 months plus. Usually not recommended to go more than 9 months or a year. That's just, hey, that's way too long to be thinking about the MCAT. Okay, Ken and I have been doing it for 10 plus, 12 plus, right? We don't wish that on anyone. So over a year of studying is like way too long. And it's honestly diminishing returns. Burnout is going to be a real issue, et cetera, et cetera. So you really want to pick a time where it's like, okay, I know the next 4, 5, 6 months of my life, like I can sit down and kind of just get absorbed into this world of MCAT. That's going to be really good for you. Besides just carving out months of your life, you got to have like a really reliable calendar. So when I first started, was not super. I mean, again, like I said, I was working Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I got home by 6, ate dinner, yada yada. I would start my MCAT prep at like 8 p.m. Right. So I was like, okay, cool. 8 to 10, 8 to 11. I got like 3-ish, 4 hours a night. And in the beginning, it was really wasted time because like I would sit down and go, okay, it's time to study MCAT. My calendar literally says MCAT. And that was all that it said. And like it didn't have anything else in there. So I was like, okay, what should I be doing? Should I be reading a book? Should I be doing questions? Should I be doing review? Like what should I be doing here? So I was kind of lost, and the beginning was really not effective use of my time, basically. So be sure to plug all those things in and like get specific with it. I honestly, I don't think this is the same for everybody, but one of the things that worked for me was getting essentially getting down to the nitty gritty on like hour by hour. Like I would put on my Google Calendar, hey, from 8 to 10, you're going to be reading these chapters. And then from 10 to 11, you're going to be doing these practice questions, right? So like I would actually schedule out on my calendar. So put content, put practice questions, put like review and flashcards, all that good stuff actually on your schedule. And then here's the other thing that a lot of people do. And I see a lot of like post-mortem regret about this, like after the MCAT, is we spent too long in our like safety bubble of content review, of just like doing a lot of reading, a lot of watching videos, a lot of that stuff. And like we don't feel, quote unquote, feel like we're ready to start taking exams or to start doing questions. And like just rip the band-aid. That's literally, I say that's what the full-length exams are there for, is to show us the things that we need to work on moving forward. If it doesn't matter if you're not getting perfect scores on your practice tests. If you were getting perfect scores on your practice test, stop practicing, go take the real thing, right? So like that's what they're there for, is to kind of show you, oh, this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm weak at, and then afterwards you can start doing targeted review. Now, I'm sure some of y'all heard me say, practice exams, plural, multiple, right? So yes, I'm a little bit of a sadist to my students, and I say, hey, we're doing like 6 to 9 to 10 practice exams, right? So that alone, just testing, if it's about 7.5, we'll round to 8 hours. That's like what, 50 some hours, 60 some hours of just taking the exam, double that just to review it, right? And then that's not even including all of your content review and other Q banks and stuff like that, any tutoring sessions that you do, yada, yada. So long story short, it is hundreds of hours. Like on average, it's like 250 to like 300 plus hours of studying. And that can sound really daunting, but you're at the same time, you're like, oh, I've got 6 months. It's totally fine. Do the time math. Like, track what you're doing for a week. And if you're going like, oh, okay, so I'm actually only studying about, 7 to 10 hours a week, divide your 300 by that, and you go, okay, cool. Do I have 30 weeks to prep for the MCAT? What is that? 30 divided by 4-ish weeks? It's like, was it 9-ish? No, 6, 7 months. Like that's a lot of time, right? So you got to make sure that like your timeline that you're currently on is matching up with when you're going to be taking the test, when you're going to be doing all these things. So timelines are really important. Having an effective study plan is honestly, I think, one of the most important things that makes or breaks someone's like prep journey, essentially. So that's the basics. Let's flip to the next one. We got, excuse me. This is a great study plan. This is what like I want to see with my students. So you can kind of see if you squint your eyes here, it's Monday through Friday, and they have specific tasks that they're keeping track of on every single day. They're color coordinating it. Green is completed, yellow is we're still going to do it later on. There's like full-length exams, there's practice questions. So this is a really, really good, effective study plan. And it might be hard to do this on your own. Hey, that's what we're here for. Like med school coach tutors, like we build these for our students. So it's nice to just not have any of the questioning of like, what should I be doing today? What should I be doing right now? Like it's all answered for you. You know what you should be doing. You just check your plan and you move. And like you don't waste time going like, hey, what should I be studying? You just dive right into it. So yes, effective study plans are one of the most important things that you can do for your prep. And then last but not least, these are some specific like study strategies. And I'm not even exaggerating. I think one of the most common things, and Ken, like, let me know if this is the case for you too. I think one of the most common things I end up teaching my students, besides basic chemistry and stuff like that, is literally like, how do I study? Like, hey, Hunter, how do I study? And that's not our fault. It's not your fault. It's not anyone's fault. Well, if we're going to place the blame, it's the American education system. It doesn't really teach us how to like properly and effectively study and learn things. So if you're in the middle of your MCAT prep and you have found yourself going like, what am I doing? Like, am I illiterate? Do I know how to study? Like, what's going on? It's not you. It is ubiquitous. A lot of us feel this way. So here's just a couple of the most like effective study tools. So spaced repetition. I love spaced repetition. Basically, it's you cover the things that you're really familiar with less frequently, and you review the things that you're not familiar with more frequently. That's a TLDR. There's a couple different ways to do it. I mean, Anki, if anyone's using that, it's got it built into it. That was one of the cool things about Anki way back in the day when I was prepping for it. They were kind of the first one to do it like digitally and like, ooh, spaced repetition built to it. Now it's kind of like, it's kind of pervasive. Everyone knows what spaced repetition is, and it's really, really effective. There's tons of literature out there that shows that spaced repetition is a really effective way to learn material. I would do it with my flashcards, like if I was doing flashcards, I would have like, these are my good ones, these are my bad ones, these are my really bad ones, and you just kind of review them accordingly. That and like flashcards are kind of, if you look at the next bullet point, they're kind of teetering on like the passive studying. So what the heck is active studying versus passive studying? And actually, anybody throw it in the chat. Like, what do you think active versus passive? Give me some examples of active versus passive while we kind of like talk about why it's not good. So passive studying, I mean, I don't want to say it's not good. You have to do it. It's just, it only takes you so far, right? So like passive studying is things like reading textbooks, watching videos. Yeah. Oh, I actually like this one, studying without really paying attention, writing as much as you remember. Like, it's a lot of these like, yeah, you're not actually engaging your brain in this critical way, right? So it's kind of like you're just going through the motions of studying. So you can kind of turn anything into an active study session. You just have to engage yourself a little bit more. And honestly, again, this isn't your fault. It's your darn brain for being so quick. Like it gets bored of really easy passive things really quickly, right? You have to constantly like engage your tricky little brain in order to keep it kind of fresh and interested in the material. So some of the ways that you can do it. Yeah, Tina, absolutely. I love, you just literally stole the words out of my mouth, right? Summarizing what you just read in your own words. That's actually a really good car strategy too. Quizzing yourself, making like not just going through your notes, but when you're going through your notes, like generate and literally I call it like taking questions, but like on the side of another sheet of paper, go like, all right, what kind of questions do I think they could ask me based on this material, right? This content, et cetera, et cetera. So it really is about mastering the concepts and like understanding the way to think about it. It's not just about memorization. And that honestly goes into the next one, review mistakes thoroughly. Y'all, I'm not exaggerating. Like the reason why we take practice tests is just so that we can review them afterwards. Like they are worth their weight in gold when it comes to the actual in-depth review. And if it takes 7.5, 8 hours to go through an MCAT, and that is you at like as fast as possible, right? The clock is ticking down. You got 60 seconds per question. Like it is a madhouse. That's just to take it. It should take you just as long if you're reviewing it really thoroughly in depth, right? You have 60 seconds per question when you're taking the test, but when you're reviewing the test, you're stuck on like a really hard physics problem or something and you don't get it, you might sit there and like teach yourself how to get that answer. And it might take like 10, 15, 20 minutes, right? So like on average, it's probably going to take you 8 to 10 hours just to review the exam. So but like that's where the good stuff is. Like I don't want this to sound bad. That's where the money is. That's where you're going, oh, this is what I'm doing wrong, and this is what I need to do better for next time, et cetera, et cetera. But you cannot do that kind of prep and that kind of like learning through your mistakes if you don't have that baseline of content, right? So like you need to have it. In very dramatic fashion, I like to say two things about content review on the test. Number one, uh, it's content review is like the sign at a roller coaster that says like you must be this tall to ride the ride, right? It's like once you get your base level of content, then you can ride the ride and have fun and start doing the MCAT. I also like to say that like, and this is the much more dramatic, serious one. It's like the MCAT doesn't reward you for having your content memorized. It expects it. It expects you to have all of your content, and then you get rewarded with like high scores once you know how to apply it after that. So it really is this kind of combination of like, yes, you need the beginning of your prep plan, a good content base, but then after that, like get out of that comfort zone, get out of there and start making mistakes. Go start doing active studying. Go learn things that hurt and don't feel good, and don't just stay in the content phase. So yeah, study harder, not or study smarter, not just harder. You got to study a little hard, but it's not just harder.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Hunter. And all excellent points, right? You asked earlier when it comes to studying, what we often do as tutors is really teaching students how to study properly, right? That's actually a challenge for a lot of students where, perhaps they struggle with their college courses, never figured out exactly how to study, and then they get to the MCAT and they're also struggling to study effectively, right? So for a lot of people, it's really sort of thinking about how we learn and memorize information, right? That's why we talk about passive learning versus active learning, right? And often students who haven't heard about this before, it's almost like a light bulb moment where you realize, oh, I've really only been doing passive studying while I've been studying for classes, right? I go to class, I listen to lecture, I read the textbook, right? But they don't really incorporate as much active learning, right? Trying to test your recall with flashcards, trying to do practice questions, right? So all of that is incredibly helpful, right, to improve your score. And I also heard, a lot of good information in the chat, right? People talking about, hey, if you study for 30 minutes, you should give yourself a 10-minute break. That's what a lot of people would call the Pomodoro technique for studying, right? And that's incredibly important because sometimes, you hear, and you saw early in the slides, we're talking about studying for several hundred hours for the MCAT, right? And if you think about it, if you're going to be studying 30 to 40 hours per week, you'd realize, hey, maybe on one day I got to study for 5 hours. Does anyone seriously just sit down and study 5 hours straight? And the answer is probably not, right? That's pretty tough to do. So for a lot of students, they can study, for 30 minutes, an hour. They've got to take some kind of a mental break to be able to reset and then study another chunk of time, right? So all good information. Now, the next thing I actually want to talk about is one of the great tools that we've developed here at Med School Coach. This is our MCAT Prep app. I'm not sure if any of you have used this app, but if you have, you can certainly write in the chat. Let us know if you're enjoying this mobile application. If any of you aren't familiar with it, you can actually go to the App Store on iOS devices, or you can go on the Google Play Store on Android devices. And if you simply search up MCAT, you're going to find that there's actually quite a lot of different mobile applications for helping students to study for the MCAT. All right. And you'll find very quickly our MCAT Prep app is the #1 rated MCAT Prep app. We've got over 1,000 5-star reviews, so certainly worth checking out. And what we're actually offering for all of you here today is a lifetime subscription to our MCAT Prep app. So if you simply look in the chat, I'm going to drop this link right here. Our MCAT Prep app, first of all, it has hundreds and hundreds of videos covering the highest yield science content on the MCAT exam. And for each of those videos, it actually has practice questions, flashcards, lecture notes, and whiteboard notes to help you reinforce your learning, right? And normally there's a monthly subscription for $29.99, an annual subscription for $99.99. So right now, here is an opportunity for you to sign up for a lifetime subscription for $99.99. So you can certainly check it out. All right. There's a lot more that we do want to talk about. So the next thing that I want to discuss is more about practicing, right? Like a 99th percentile student, right? So we heard earlier, you need to do a lot of practice. You need to take a lot of practice exams, right? All of that is important, but it's not just taking practice exams. You do need to make sure you're doing practice effectively, all right? And what I mean by that is a lot of students know they should do practice, but there's a lot of students who don't actually do practice the way they should, right? And several examples would be students starting practice exams in the afternoon, right? If you're starting your practice exam at 3 p.m., you probably finish at 10 p.m. The unfortunate news is your MCAT is not at 3 p.m. Your MCAT's at 8 a.m., right? Or other examples I often see is students doing small amounts of practice at a time, right? A really common thing that students like to do is one CARS passage per day, right? Like a daily CARS passage. And this is not bad starting off, but the issue is if you always only do one passage a day, it really doesn't help you prepare for the actual MCAT because on test day for the car section, you're completing 9 passages in one sitting, right? And doing a passage a day is not bad, but the challenge there is you're not developing 2 important skills, which is pacing as well as building stamina, right? The MCAT's a 7-hour exam. For most students, if you take a practice exam, by the time you finish the first section, you're already exhausted, right? So imagine having to complete 3 more sections after that. To make sure that you're able to maintain stamina and your focus throughout the entire duration of the exam, you need to make sure you're taking multiple full-length practice exams. And the other aspect I discussed was pacing. Many students know, oh, for the CARS section, we've got 90 minutes to complete 9 passages, right? So doing the math, that's 10 minutes per passage. If you're doing one passage at a time, it's very easy to say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and complete this in 10 minutes. But where you might start to struggle is if you start doing 9 passages at a time. It's much harder to maintain that 10 minutes per passage average, right? And that's why for quite a lot of students for the CARS section, they end up running out of time, right? And they might only be able to complete 7 passages or 8 passages and have to guess on the last 1 to 2 passages. So by making sure you're taking full-length practice exams, or at least a full section's worth of practice at a time, you can learn to pace yourself to make sure you're not spending too much time on the first few passages and running out of time near them. And another important point, we talked about this earlier, right, which is the importance of reviewing practice exams. There's a lot of students that we speak to, right? And these are students who, maybe they've been studying for a few months, or these are students who have already taken the MCAT and essentially didn't get the score they want, or their practice exam scores are plateauing. And they're trying to figure out, why are their scores not going up, right? Why do they keep getting the same score over and over again? And practically speaking, the only reason why a student's score doesn't improve is because they're not properly reviewing their practice exams. Because if you're properly reviewing your practice exams, you should be learning from your mistakes. And if you learn from your mistakes, you should not be making repeat mistakes. And that's how your score improves. So of course, that's easier said than done, right? So how exactly do you review your practice exams properly? There's 3 key questions that you need to ask yourself for every question that you get wrong, right? Which is, why did I get this question wrong? How do I get this type of question right next time? And if I missed the question because I was lacking content knowledge, what content knowledge was I lacking, right? These 3 questions, incredibly important to make sure you understand why you missed the question and how you can get that same type of question right next time. And I know often you go to these presentations and you hear sort of these generic strategies and such, and don't really see how it can be applied in practice. So now we're actually going to take a look at some actual practice questions. Hunter's going to lead the first one. I'm going to lead the second one, so you can all see how you can actually implement the strategies that we're talking about.
Heck
Hunter,
yeah.
take it away.
Love it. And then quick answer for you, Zoe from the chat. After taking the MCAT, are we able to review concepts that we got wrong on the actual exam? No, unfortunately, you will never see that exam again. It disappears into the black hole, and then the AMC tells you if you should be happy or sad afterwards. So hey, let's dive into this. We're gonna go through this quick little cars question. Before we do though, like, because this is all about like how to review, right? Like, what should you do after you do a series of questions? You're checking out, like, did I get things right or wrong, right? The wrong thing to do is the wrong thing to do is to fight the text, is to fight the passage. Don't fight the explanations, right? And this is a very safe space, everybody. We are all friends here. We're all in the same trauma together, right? So throw it in the chat. How many of us, and be honest, if you're already prepping, after going through a cars passage and you're reading the explanations, have any of us ever read an explanation again, like been like, fine, whatever, I guess it's that, but you don't really believe it? Like, in your heart of hearts, you're like, that's a stupid answer and I don't agree with that. Okay. Okay, yeah. So this is basically everybody, all right? And like, it was me at first too. I'm not even gonna lie. I was like ready to throw down with some of these cars questions, but then I had this big epiphany. Okay, it's about playing a game, and you are here to learn the rules of how to play this game, specifically cars. Like the other ones, science, physics, your chemistry, there's established rules, and you learn those when you're doing your content review. Cars is really tricky because it's like, what are the rules, right? And like, I really do think that like cars is one of the sections where people benefit the most from tutoring, because it's one of the ones where it's the easiest to just feel like you're fumbling around and you don't really know what's going on. So that's what we're here to do right now is sorry, I didn't mean to make you feel seen like that. but hopefully y'all see that like this is not unique to you. Like none of us alone have an issue that like I can guarantee Ken or I have not seen in our years of doing this. So like there are common issues, and there are also like common ways to overcome it. The MCAT is a standardized test, which means it has standardized questions, standardized answers, and we can come up with a standardized plan, right? Standardized. We customize it to everybody. Not everyone's the same. So we're the things that are not standard there. But take a second or so, read through this little paragraph on the left side, okay? And throw like a thumbs up in the chat when y'all are done just reading the passage or the paragraph. We'll give you like a minute or so. Nice, getting some fast thumbs. We'll do, check out my watch. That's definitely actually on my wrist. We'll do 30 more seconds. Okay, tons of thumbs. If you're still reading it, please continue to do so. Just finish it up. I'm just yapping. You're not missing anything. But let's talk about it. I saw some people throw the answer, what they thought was the answer, in the chat. And I'm just kind of curious. You know what? If you think you have your answer, keep it in your head. If you don't want to share, that's totally fine. If you think you know the answer, throw it in the chat. I'm curious to know what everyone's thinking. So let's take a look at what's going on here, right? The argument maybe by the author in paragraph 2 would be most strengthened if it included. And let's say that we picked something that wasn't the correct answer, right? I'm Ken, what do you think? I'm debating if we should show him the answer first or if we should just like work through it like without the answer, you know? Let's do this. Let's not reveal the answer. Oh, it might be part of the animations actually. Do you know that? Let's click the next. Let's see what happens. Okay, perfect. It doesn't show it. Okay, that's actually what I was looking for. Okay, so we're not going to reveal the answer to the very end, but let's just assume that we got this wrong. And you have to ask yourself, like, what did I do wrong? So first and foremost, if you look at, and this is exactly how I teach my students to analyze cars questions, y'all, like after the test and after we're doing this. So if you're looking at this, you go like, okay, what was the question itself asking me for? So it wants to strengthen something. And what is it strengthening? The argument. So that's your first task. Find the argument. What are we doing? And we've nicely highlighted here on the left what the actual argument is, right? So you can cut all the other fluff out and just the highlighted part. That's the actual meat of the argument. So first point, number one, or first claim, uh, there was a weakened position of liberal conservatives within the Republican Party. Number two, it didn't set well with the financial sector. And number three, the Obama campaign was consistently better funded. Okay, so that is the argument that the author is putting forward is, hey, this position was weakened because of this, and it didn't affect these other people. Okay, so if you look through your answer choices, oh, look at all these good answer choices. Okay, so if you look through your answer choices, it really is about which one is A, talking about the information from the passage, and B, actually answering the question that they're posing to us, right? So yeah, Maria, I do like your answer here. So we can reveal the answer at this point, right? And we can say, all right, what is it? We click submit, or we're at the end of our test. Okay, it was A, right? And if we're looking at it, A is saying, all right, evidence that the policy proposals made by the McCain campaign were more radical than those usually made by liberal conservatives. Remember, number one, we're trying to strengthen what the author was saying. So what did they say? That, hey, the position of liberal conservatives was weakened. Why? Because things that the financial sector didn't like it. What makes an argument really, really nice and strong and hard to push back against? Evidence, support, right? So what would strengthen that claim? A, if we had actual evidence that the policy proposals were more radical, right? And here radical is you can kind of take that as like, whoa, this is a little crazy. Like, we don't like this, right? So A is a pretty good answer. Now, if we didn't get this, which like a lot of people don't, it's not just us, it's experts. Sometimes I get things wrong. And anytime I get something wrong, I always ask myself, three things. Ken, let's go to the next slide. These are the three things that I ask myself, right? What kind of question is it? Why did I miss it? And how am I supposed to get this right for next time? So this kind of question, right? There's lots of different like terms and like nomenclature and like the way that people classify questions in cars and in the other sections as well. But I would say that like the big one is the AMC. So the AMC itself says, hey, there are three different skill categories: foundations of comprehension, which is basically just a scavenger hunt. Can you go find details and like read the passage? Great. What's the main idea? Yada, yada, yada. There's reasoning within the text where you have to kind of do a little bit more digging, a little bit more critical and critical thinking. And then there's the third one, reasoning beyond the text. And that's where they bring in new information and you have to incorporate it into the passage or whatever they were talking about. So this one, I would say it's a strength and weaken. We were looking for which one of these is going to strengthen something. And then A, B, C, and D are kind of new information. So I'd say this probably teeters the line between like reasoning beyond the text and then reasoning within. It's strength and weaken, but there's new info. So, all right, I know what kind of question it is. Why does that matter, Hunter? Why am I sitting here going like, let's analyze why I'm bad at this? Because it makes perfect sense to do so. Like, you can't grow unless you know like what you're doing wrong. And so like what we're doing, and we do this too with our students, we keep this long running list of like, here's all the mistakes that we made. And you can go through and analyze it and go, okay, there seems to be a trend of I am missing this type of question over and over and over again. And once you analyze the trend, you can start to make specific like changes to your study or like the way that you're testing in order to fix it. So that's why we ask like, what kind of question is it? Why are we missing this? Oh yeah, Dhruva. There is definitely a 1/4 of the exam is basically a reading section. Yeah. So that's the first thing we ask ourselves. What kind of question was it, so that I can kind of analyze trends and see if I have a particular weakness or some sort of systemic issue. Yeah, Pratini, yeah, 1/4. There are 4 sections, one of them is cars. So with that, the next part that you need to ask yourself is, why did I miss this? And this is, I think, one of the more difficult questions, because we probably believed that whatever we picked was right, So like, why did I miss this? Like, oh my gosh, I totally thought something else was going on. Chat, I'm cooked. No, Rohan, you're not. We're gonna get you out of the oven. You're gonna be fine. So it can be a myriad of things with the why did I miss this question. Okay, so I think The not as effective way to answer this question is, oh, I missed a detail, or oh, I didn't read the passage, or oh, I didn't understand the question, right? Those are kind of surface level things. And we can honestly expand this into the sciences too. Like, this is literally the exact same thing that we do the science. Ken's going to do that in a second. But like, did I miss this science question because of a math mistake? Did I miss it because I didn't analyze the figure correctly? Did I not know my content? There's like usually more than one reason why we're missing a question. There's like 2, 3, 4 reasons kind of all mixing together in this awful conglomerate, and then ends up in us missing the question. So really identifying why you missed it is super important. And then once you know, okay, this is why I missed it, you need to literally ask yourself, and I would do this out loud. I would verbally say this out loud and then just transcribe what I was writing down or what I was saying. Now you know why you missed it. You can start to make purposeful and specific changes to either the way that you're prepping or the way that you're answering these questions in order to not miss that again. So if it was something like I misinterpreted, oh, actually, here's one that's super common, right? The first half of the answer choice was correct, and we didn't actually read the second half, and we just went like, oh yeah, that looks right, pick, and like the second half is totally dead wrong, right? If we see on our little list that we're keeping track here of all of our mistakes and everything, that we do that over and over and over again. How did I miss? Hey, why did I miss this question? Oh, I only read half of it. I only read half the answer. The second half of the answer was wrong. That is a systemic behavioral issue that you need to like recognize and then change, right? So how can you answer that correctly? Read the entire, like force yourself to read the entire question, right? So the how do I answer this better next time is always going to be different based on like why you got it wrong in the first place and what kind of a person you are, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, when it comes to reviewing practice problems, going all the way back to the beginning when we first started talking about this, you cannot just read the explanation and go like, all right, fine, whatever, I guess it's C, fine, whatever, right? And like, we're mad. It feels good. It feels good to be like that, but it doesn't help us in the long run. So genuinely, it is all about learning from your mistakes. Like, embrace your mistakes. I always say that fail is an acronym. It's your first attempt in learning. It's a good thing as long as you only get it wrong once, and then learn from your mistakes. So yeah, when we look at all the other ones, A is talking about evidence. B is talking about details about the profits earned in the financial sector. That's not the argument that they were talking about. They were talking about how the liberal conservatives were weakened. That was the position that they had, and that was weakened. So we can get rid of that one. And then a C, a plausible descriptor of what made the Obama campaign attractive to donors. I mean, that might be a separate argument. This is the evidence of why the Obama campaign was attractive. But remember, what is the argument in paragraph 2? That's what the question's asking for, right? And that could be another reason why we missed the question. Hey, we just picked a true statement. We didn't actually pick what answered the question. That happens all the time. So yeah, remember, the argument is, hey, the liberal position within the Republican Party was weakened, right? So that's what we're trying to support. And then D, an account of how public support in McCain changed throughout the 2008 election season. Again, we are literally talking about very specific things in this paragraph. We're talking about the liberal conservatives and the Republican Party and how their decisions did not sit well with the financial sector, right? So A is our better answer with this one. So yeah, hey, that's a little walkthrough of how I like to do cars with students. I think cars is kind of one of the weirder ones. And this is, it's one paragraph, one question out of context. It feels a little different when, like Ken said, you're doing not just one passage that's 5 paragraphs and 7 questions, but you're doing that 9 times in a row, back to back to back. It can get a little exhausting. So we got your back. That's what we're here for. So yeah, hope you all had fun with that one. Ken, take it away, sir.
Thank you, Hunter. There is a point I want to emphasize here, right? And this is just because it's the car section, right? There's a lot of students who think, oh, cars is like verbal reasoning on the SAT. There's nothing for me to study, right? And yes, it's true that there's no history or philosophy or art that you're expected to know in order to answer these questions, right? You're just reading passages and topics, and you have to answer some questions about them. But that doesn't mean you can't learn to get better at cars, right? And this review that Hunter went through is actually quite critical. Too often, when you're looking at MCAT cars questions, when you answer the questions, when you read the solutions are usually in the form of, oh, you were supposed to look at paragraph 3. Paragraph 3 said this, which is why the correct answer is so and so, right? Too many of those solutions focus on understanding the content of the passage, right? When instead you really want to generalize it and think, what exactly is the reasoning skill that the AMC is trying to test me on here, right? And if you take a look at this question, it really is that, if you look at this text, the author's making 2 points, right? That by selecting McCain and Palin, this showed 2 things. Number one, it indicated the weakened positioning of the liberal conservatives. And number 2, this did not sit well with the financial sector. And if you want to strengthen any argument, you need evidence. And here they provided evidence, right? Obama's campaign was better funded. So you had evidence for number 2, but you don't have evidence for number 1, which is what leads you to the correct answer of A, right? But instead of saying, oh, I need to know something about like Republicans and Democrats or whatever, you really just want to generalize it to be, hey, you have 2 points that were made. You have support for one, you don't have support for the other. So that way you can try to apply that to future CARS questions. All right, so what we're going to talk about now is going to be another question on the sciences, which, I'll give all of you about a minute or so to take a look at this question, drop in the chat what you think is the correct answer. And quick couple of points, right? Because I know earlier I dropped the link to the MCAT prep app for the lifetime subscription. So just a quick note for any of you who have signed up for the lifetime subscription for the MCAT prep app, you will get an email from Hunter or myself on Monday with instructions for redeeming your lifetime access. So please wait, be patient. On Monday, you will get that email. It will get you access to your lifetime subscription. And again, for now, we're taking a look at this question, review it, and put into the chat what you think the correct answer is. And for others who wanted to sign up for the lifetime subscription, I'm going to put the link in the chat again. All right, so surprisingly, a minute has passed, and you might be thinking, a minute is not a lot of time. And the answer is yes, it really is not a lot of time, right? The MCAT is not just testing your knowledge of science and your reasoning skills, but there's actually quite a bit of time pressure when it comes to the MCAT, right? Now, I will say, looking at the answer choices that we had in the chat, we pretty much had everything, A, B, C, and D, right? So if we have every answer choice, that means, clearly we're not doing particularly well in this question, which is okay because none of you are taking the MCAT today, right? And also, we're really trying to reinforce how to properly study for the MCAT, right? So the correct answer here is A. And remember, what we're trying to focus on is, okay, if you don't get the correct answer of A, how can you make sure that you can review this question properly and get a similar type of question right in the future? And as we said, 3 key questions. Why did I get this question wrong? What do I have to do to get this question right next time? And if I missed this question because I was lacking content knowledge, what knowledge was I lacking, right? And the first question of why I got this question wrong can be really hard for a lot of students to answer. And that's because for a lot of students, when they're reviewing questions, they read the question, they look at the answer choices, they read the solution, right? But reading the solution, it helps you to understand how to answer the question. It doesn't help you to understand why you missed the question. So to understand how you missed the question, we have this diagram showing all 9 steps that you need to answer this question. And you might be thinking, this looks like a simple question. Why does it require 9 steps? Well, it's because first, anytime you look at a question, you got to figure out what exactly is the MCAT trying to test you on, right? So if you looked at this question, did you understand that it's testing you on physics? It's testing you on optics. Number 2, if you know the topic of the question, that this is on optics, mirrors, and lenses, do you understand what exactly they're asking for, which is power of a lens? And step number 3, do you recall the equation for the power of the lens? Because there is no equation sheet you get for the MCAT. You're expected to have this memorized. And number 4, did you note that this question is asking about diverging lenses, which have a negative focal length? Number 5, did you remember that, hey, they want power, but the units are in diopters? So did you remember that a diopter is a 1/meter, which means they give you centimeters. You have to remember it's 100 centimeters in a meter. So you have to know this conversion, then you have to be able to do the math where you're able to correctly convert 2 centimeters to 0.02 meters. And finally, you need to do the math. You need to divide 1 divided by 0.02 gives you 50, which with that negative sign gives you the correct answer of A, negative 50 diopters. I know this is a lot, right? But this is really how studying for the MCAT works. You need to take a look at these 9 steps and try to figure out, of these 9 different steps, which step did you get wrong, right? Which step did you miss? And sometimes it's multiple steps. And depending on what that step is that you missed, that's what you would need to focus on to make sure you don't make that mistake again. And indeed, there's no equation sheet. There are no calculators on MCAT. So if you, for example, knew all of this, but really just messed up on that last step, 1 divided by 0.02, it's not physics you need to study. It's really the math. You need to practice how to do math with fractions and decimals without a calculator. All right. So I hope that demonstration was helpful. And a final point that I really want to make is that studying for the MCAT is incredibly difficult, right? And for a lot of students, it can be an isolating process. And Hunter and I have been doing this for over a decade, right? And often when we speak to a student who's struggling, it's not always because they're not putting in enough time and effort into their studies. Often you don't know what you don't know. So the conversations we have with students often begins with, hey, tell us what you're doing with your studying, right? So we can understand what you're doing, we can figure out what you might be doing wrong, right? And once we're able to figure out what you might be doing incorrectly with your studies, we can then correct your path and get you back on track to improving your scores and reaching your target scores. And that's actually what we can do here at Med School Coach, right? So at Med School Coach, we have a phenomenal team of 50 plus MCAT tutors who have all scored over 520 on the MCAT exam. And these MCAT tutors are not just good test takers, they're also excellent instructors as well. They're really good at communicating their knowledge of science content and test taking strategies to students. And that's the reason why our MCAT tutoring program has an average score improvement of 10 to 12 points. So if any of you are interested in working with one of our MCAT tutors, you actually see here right on this slide, there's this QR code. If you use this QR code, you can scan it and you'll be able to speak with a member of our enrollment team who can help you sign up for one of our MCAT tutoring packages. And there's also a link that is in the chat. So if you click that link, you can also book a meeting with our enrollment team and they can tell you more about our MCAT tutoring packages. And that essentially covers the presentation that we have for today. And I think we've got 2 minutes before we've got to hand it over. So I think maybe a quick question, Hunter, if you want to take this. I saw it several times in the chat, which is, when should a student take the MCAT?
Oh, that's a really good question. Okay, so you should take the MCAT when you're ready. There's always going to be things that lead into this, and there's always factors and stuff like, when do you want to go into school, when do you want to apply, when do you want to matriculate, yada yada yada. Are you taking gap years? When do you have a free 3 to 6 months to prep for this, et cetera, et cetera? So you need to kind of collect all these pieces. But what I see happen a lot of the times is, we're approaching test day, we're maybe a month or so out, and we're not feeling up to it, and we push through it, and we're like, no, I have to take it for these insert arbitrary reasons. Unless it's life and death, or you literally have no other option, don't force yourself to take the MCAT unless you feel ready for it. Now, I will be the first one to say, nobody really totally feels ready for it. Okay, I walked out of my MCAT and I thought that I bombed it, straight up. I've talked to hundreds of tutors who have all scored 520 plus, and it's kind of the same story. We all kind of feel bad walking out of it. That being said, how do you know that you're ready for it? Data, decisions with data, dude. So like, oh, that alliteration right there. So practice exams, right? Are your average Fulling scores going up? Have you been able to address some of the specific things that you've been noting down on, like, why am I missing these questions, right? Like, have you checked those boxes, et cetera, et cetera? Like, those are the things. Like, use data and like kind of know where you're at. Don't just like trust your anxiety riddled heart, right? But I really do think the best time to take it is when you're ready, and that's going to be different for everybody. There is no easier time to take the test. It's not like January is easier than May or anything like that. So yeah, it's when you're ready. And if you're not ready and you've been throwing yourself at it for a little while, like it's not defeat. It's just, hey, I might need another pair of eyes to help me understand what's going on here, right? And that's literally what Ken and I are here to do. So happy to help y'all out if you need it.